Hello, today we'll be covering the basics of Adobe Illustrator to help you with your book cover project. If you need additional help while working on your project, we highly suggest you visit our office hours at College Library or Mortgage Hall. You can see our schedule and availability at sts.doit.wisc.edu. To start a new project, go ahead and click on the blue button that says New File. From here, you can change your project settings. First, rename your project according to your project guidelines. For your width and height, make sure your unit of measurement is correct. I'll be changing mine to inches, but you can change it according to whatever you need. Make sure your orientation is what you need it to be. And for artboards, we'll just keep ours at 1, but yours might be different. For the bleed, we'll leave ours as 0. And for color mode, it will depend on whether you'll be printing or keeping it digital. If you'll be printing, leave it at CMYK. If you're going to be only saving as a digital project, change it to RGB. This will give you more color options. For raster effects, usually we like to keep it at high, especially if you'll be printing, but again, refer to your project guidelines. Once you're good with this, go ahead and hit Create. Let's review the Illustrator interface. For this example, I will be using the Essentials workspace. To confirm if you are also on the same workspace, you can click on the icon at the upper right-hand corner and make sure that Essentials is checked. On the left-hand side, you'll see a bunch of tools that we can use. If you hover over any of these tools, they will give you a preview of what they do. If you see a white triangle on any of these tools, you can click and hold down that tool to reveal more similar tools. If you want even more options for tools, you can click on these 3 dots at the very bottom, and these will reveal all of the tools that are available to you within Illustrator. On our right-hand side, you'll see the Properties panel. This will change according to what you're currently selected on. This is very useful because as you're working on your project and are selected on different parts, this will determine what could be best suited for your next step. So for instance, if we are selected currently on our document, all of the Properties panel suggestions will be directed towards that. If we're selected on the Type tool, however, this will transform to give us more options relating to the Type tool. Next to Properties, you should see the Layers panel. Here will live all of the objects we create within Illustrator. So anytime we add new shapes, they will now be part of the main layer. Here's an example of a project that has more than one main layer to it. You can also create new layers if you'd like by clicking on the plus sign at the very bottom, and you can rearrange this wherever you'd like. You can rename it by double-clicking on the current name. And now if you're selected on that current layer and create something on your project, it will create sub-layers within that layer. Here I have 3 other main layers, of which I've organized as text, graphics, and background. You do not have to organize your project like this, but it does make it easier in case you need to hide or lock any parts of this. So if I wanted to temporarily hide my graphics, because they're all within one main layer, I can click on my eyeball and get rid of all my graphics and just leave my background and my text. Similarly, if I only wanted to lock my text, I can click on the little space between my eyeball and my text name, and now this is something I can't move if I click and drag on it. You can also expand these layers to reveal all of the sublayers, and from here you can one by one hide or lock layers as you need to. To navigate the workspace, if you have a trackpad, you can do a 2-finger swipe to pan, or you can pinch in or out to zoom in or out. If you're having issues with your trackpad or you're using a mouse, just hold down your space bar, your cursor will become a little hand, and then you can click and drag to wherever part you need. To zoom in or out using your keyboard, if you're using a Mac, you can do a Command plus or Command minus. And if you're using a Windows, you can do a Control plus, Control minus. If you've zoomed in, 2 in or 2 out, and you've lost your place, to easily get back to your project, you can do a Command 0 if you're using Mac, or Control 0 if you're using a Windows machine. Before starting on your project, you may want to add guidelines or grids to help you organize your content. To do this, just click once on your document and go to the Properties panel. Within the Properties panel, you should be able to see Rulers and Grids, Guides, and Snap options. Within Rulers and Grids, you can click on the first icon to bring up rulers. The second icon should be able to bring up a grid. Your grid settings may look different from mine. I'll show you in a moment how to adjust them if you need to. To add guides, make sure it's first selected within your Properties panel. Another option I recommend you have turned on is your Snap to Grid option. It's going to be the middle icon within your Snap options. Snap to Grids will ensure that your guides are placed where you want them exactly. To add guides, you can click and drag from the rulers onto your project. So if I click and drag from my right ruler, I can place it on the exact measurement I want. If I need to move these guides for any reason, I can do so here. If I click once on my document again, within my Properties panels, I'll be able to lock my guides or hide my grids if I want them. So for instance, if I click on this grid icon, my grid lines disappear. If I want to lock these so I don't accidentally move them around, I can click on the center icon within guides. If you are not happy with your grid options, you can change them within the Smart Guides preferences. From here, you'll have a lot of options. Just go to Guides and Grid. This is where you can change the color of your guidelines, but it's also where you can change your grid. My example currently has a grid line every 1 inch with 2 subdivisions. You can adjust these according to whatever is best for your project. Once you're happy, just hit OK, and it will update accordingly. To create basic shapes, you can navigate to the Rectangle tool from the Tools panel. If you click and hold on the Rectangle tool, more shape tools will be revealed. Click and drag to create a shape. If you hold down the Shift key, it will make sure that your height and width are consistent. After you create your shape, you can resize by clicking and dragging on any of these points. Again, if you hold down the Shift key, it will maintain proportions. To rotate a shape, just hover over any of these points until you see a double-sided arrow. Click and drag to rotate. To move your shape while still on the Shape tool, make sure you click on the center point so you can move it around. Otherwise, you'll accidentally create more shapes. If you want to round out any corners, just click on the little circles and it'll go ahead and round out your shape. To change the color of your shape, select your shape and go to the Properties panel. Within Appearance, you can click on the color next to Fill, and from here you can change your color. If none of these options are ones that you want, you can click on the icon next to Swatches, and from here you can adjust the color as needed. This is also where you can add a hex code if you have one. Under Fill is where you can adjust the stroke, which is just the border of the shape. You can give it a color if you'd like, and you can also adjust the thickness of that border. Additionally, if you click on the word stroke, you can change where that stroke is aligned to. You can also add a dashed line if you'd like. Under stroke is where you can change the opacity of your shape. This will make it so that it's more or less transparent. For these shapes, you can also make circles with the ellipse tool, and you can also make polygons. If you click and drag on the polygon, by default you'll be making a hexagon. If you want to change the number of sides to your polygon, on your keyboard, click the up or down arrows to add or subtract sides. If you want to make sure that the base is horizontal, hold down your Shift key. Similar to our square, you can manipulate the corners by rounding them out, you can change its appearance, and you can move it around or resize as needed. You can also rotate however you would like. To adjust your shapes even further, you can use what's called a Direct Selection tool. From your Tools panel, navigate to the Direct Selection tool, which is the white arrow. In Illustrator, every shape you create is composed of anchor points and paths. The Direct Selection tool lets you manipulate the anchor points to further adjust your shape. To use the Direct Selection tool, click once on your shape, and then click once on the anchor point you want to adjust. Once you click on your anchor point, you'll be able to click and move around just that point. You can also adjust even further using the handles that show up. To make copies of your shape, you can just select your shape with the selection tool, and on your keyboard, click Command-C, Command-V if you're using a Mac to copy and paste. If you're using a Windows, you'll do Control-C, Control-V. If you prefer a more controlled method of copying and pasting, if you're using a Mac, you can hold down your Option key until you see a double cursor. Click and drag to make a copy. Just remember to let go of your click before you let go of your Option key. If you're using a Windows, the same thing can be done with the Alt key. If you're using a rectangle shape to be the background of your project, I highly recommend you lock the layer your rectangle is currently on. From the Layers panel, you can do one of two things. Either expand the current layer you have and lock just the layer with your rectangle so you don't accidentally move it as you're creating things on your project. Or you can just lock that entire layer and just create a new one. You can rename this to background or locked and then only work on the second layer you create. You can also rename this to whatever you want. Just make sure you're selected on the correct layer that isn't locked. Otherwise, you won't be able to use the tools. Illustrator also lets you combine existing shapes to create a brand new one. Right now, these are separate shapes that I can move around. But if I'd like to combine all of these ellipses to create a cloud-like shape, I can do so using my Shape Builder tool. First, I have to select all of my shapes that are overlapping. With my selection tool, click and drag a box around the shapes. Once selected, go to the Shape Builder tool. From here, all you have to do is click and drag a line over all of the intersecting areas. Now this is one single shape that you can change the fill color to, as well as change the stroke color if you'd like. The Shape Builder tool also lets you subtract from overlapping shapes. So in this case, if we want to create a moon, we first select both of our shapes, we select our Shape Builder tool, and instead of just clicking and dragging a line, we instead hold down our Option key if we're using a Mac, or Alt if we're using Windows. You'll notice that our cursor now has a minus sign, and then we click and drag over the areas we want to remove. Now we have a moon shape. If you'd like to create more elaborate shapes in Illustrator, we recommend you use either the pencil tool or the pen tool. The pencil tool can be located within the paintbrush tool. Just click and hold on the tool and navigate to the pencil tool. For the pencil tool, we recommend you don't have a fill color, but you do have a stroke color. I will be bumping up the stroke width to be a little bit thicker so you can see the line better. The pencil tool lets you draw free-form lines or shapes. Just click and drag to create whatever line or shape you'd like. To create a shape, just go back to the very first point you created until you see your cursor have a little circle next to it. This is now an organic shape you just created, and it can be used just as any other shape in Illustrator. You can change the appearance, you can change the size, and you can use your direct selection tool to manipulate any of the anchor points if you want to. If you don't want to create such an organic looking shape, you can use the pen tool to give you a little bit more control. The pen tool is located underneath the direct selection tool and looks like a little fountain pen without the little curve. For this one, we also recommend you have no fill color, but do have a stroke color. To use the pen tool, just click once to activate it, and from here you can create a shape. If you want your shape to just have corners, just click, click, click until you have the shape you'd like. You can also create shapes that have curves to them. So for instance, if I click and drag to any of my sides, you'll see a curve starting to form. You can make this curve wherever you'd like to create any shape you would like. Here's another example. The pen tool can also be very helpful to trace images if you have an example. Here I just copy and pasted an image of a flower that I'd like to trace. Before using the pen tool, it's recommended that you change the opacity of your image to be a little bit lower, just so that it's easier to trace, and also to lock this layer with the image so that you don't accidentally move it around as you're working with the pen tool. So for my layers panel, I've organized my project like this. I'll expand where I have my graphics layer, find my image, and I'll just lock it so I don't accidentally move this around. If you're planning to use the pen tool to trace over an image, I recommend that you first click anywhere on your document itself, and within the Properties panel, change the snap options to ensure that your snap to grid is off. This will make the tracing process much easier. While on the pen tool, make sure that you have no fill color and that you have a stroke color that's easy to see. Next, to start tracing, I'm going to make one point to activate my pen tool, and then I'm going to click and drag wherever I need to make the curves. Reminder that this doesn't have to be perfect and I can adjust later with my direct selection tool. And then I complete my shape by just clicking once on the first point I made. Once you're happy with the image that you traced and you want to get rid of it, you can go ahead and just click on either the eyeball to hide it temporarily if you want to use it later on, or if you want to go ahead and delete it completely, you can just click on the layer and click on the trash bin in the very corner. If you'd like to group shapes together, you can do so by clicking and dragging a selection over them using the selection tool, and from your Properties panel, going to where it says Quick Actions and click once on Group. This will now make sure that this is a group. To ungroup, you can go back to Properties panel and under Quick Actions, select Ungroup. There are several ways to implement type in Adobe Illustrator. The first one is the most straightforward. From your Tools panel, locate the Type tool, and to start typing, just click once to create a line of text. This method is great for titles, but not so much for paragraphs. This is because this method, instead of creating a box with boundaries, creates just one line of text that you can keep writing endlessly. If I want another line of text, I have to manually enter it by hitting my Return or Enter key on my keyboard. To adjust the font, color, or size, I can highlight whatever text I want, and from my Properties panel, I can change the appearance, character, paragraph, as well as other things. If you'd like to move the text or rotate it, you can do so with the selection tool. Once you're on the selection tool, you will see some boundaries, which will let you just click and drag to wherever you'd like, as well as hover over any point until you see a double arrow cursor, and then you can click and drag to rotate. If you want to make sure it rotates a perfect 45-degree angle, hold down your Shift key. Similarly to resize, just click and drag on any of the corners, and if you want to keep the proportions, hold down your Shift key. Another method of using the Type tool is by creating a box. So using my Type tool, instead of just clicking once to activate my text, I'm going to click and drag a box out that is around the size that I want my text to be confined to. Lorem ipsum text or dummy text will fill the box, but this is where you can go ahead and copy and paste or write up whatever text you need for your project. For my example, I will leave it as is. If you are within the text box, you're going to have to highlight the text you want to edit, and then from the Properties panel, adjust as needed. Other things you can adjust from here within the Character panel are the spacing between lines of text, the spacing between characters, as well as a bunch of other options if you click on any of the three dots. If you hover over them, they'll tell you what they do. One thing you might notice when you're working with text and you make a text box is if you want to rotate the text box, you end up just rotating the box and not the text within it. If you'd like to rotate the text itself, you're going to have to highlight the text box, go to your Tools panel, and locate the Rotate tool. From here, you should just be able to click and drag around the box, and it will go ahead and rotate for you. Similarly, if you'd like to rescale the text box and have the text within it also resize, you can click and hold on the Rotate tool to reflect the Scale tool. This tool will let you go ahead and click and drag out to rescale the entire text box with the text itself. Another way to implement text is by creating a text box based off of an existing shape you have in your project. For instance, I have this shape I created with my pen tool, and let's say I want this to become a text box. To do this, I select my shape. From my Tools panel, I locate my Type tool, and then from here, hover over near the border of your shape. Once you get close enough, you'll notice that your cursor becomes a circle. Once you see the circle, click once. Now this shape has become a text box. You can resize the text within it and adjust your settings accordingly. The only thing that you need to consider when using this method is it does erase your initial shape, so if you want to keep that shape in your project, it's a good idea to make a copy of it. One final way you can implement text in your project is by using a shape and having a text be around the path of the shape. For my Tools panel, if I hold down on my Type tool, I'll go ahead and click on Type on a Path tool. From here, I'll hover over my shape at the very edge until I see Path. From here, I'm going to click once, and now my text will be around my shape. Similar to the last example, this gets rid of your shape. If you want to keep your shape for your project for any reason, we do recommend you just make a copy of it before you do this. Another thing you're able to do with text in Illustrator is create outlines out of existing text. Once I create my text, I'll select it with my Selection tool, and then from the top menu, I'll click on Type, Create Outlines. Once I do this, this text is no longer editable as text, but instead each letter is now a shape. So if I use my Direct Selection tool, I can manipulate each of these letters as I would any other shape. By default, these will all be grouped. If you're using the Direct Selection tool, it bypasses the grouping as long as you click once on the anchor point that you want to move. You can also select or click on each of these letters to individually move them, even though they are currently grouped. If you do want to ungroup them for any reason outside of this, you can just click on it once with the Selection tool, and from your Properties panel, click Ungroup. When we're working on our project, sometimes we realize that a solid fill color isn't what we're looking for. Instead, sometimes we can create patterns ourselves and have a shape take on that pattern as its fill color. To do this, we can use what's called clipping masks. Clipping masks are essentially ways to crop images within Illustrator so that they take on a new shape. To do this, you first have to create some kind of pattern, and then you have to take a shape that you can bring over it. The shape needs to be at the very top. To confirm this is correct, you can go to your Properties panel and under Quick Actions, when you're selected on your shape, click Arrange and select Bring to Front. Once you have this, you can click and drag a selection over all of your shapes. After this, within your Properties panel, you should see a clipping mask option. If you don't see it, you can right-click on your shapes and select Make Clipping Mask. Once you've done this, you now have your shape that's taken on whatever pattern was underneath it. If you'd like to edit the content within this shape, you can double-click on this. And once you're in isolation mode, you'll notice that this gray bar appears at the top. That means that now you can move elements if you'd like to, or you can also resize them. Once you're happy with what it looks like, you can click on this back arrow or double-click anywhere in the gray area. If you're trying to give your project a little bit more depth, adding effects might be a good start. To add effects, select on an object within your project, and within Properties, go to the Appearance section and click on the little effects in the corner. From here, you'll be able to add several effects that Illustrator provides. For this example, I'm going to go to Stylize and add a drop shadow. For this drop shadow effect, you can change the mode in which it interacts with all the other parts of your project. You can change how opaque it is, as well as the location of the X and Y. So if I scroll over my X offset, you can see where this shadow is relative to my project. and I can move this to wherever I'd like. You can also change the color as well as the blur. Make sure your preview is on so you can see it before applying it. Once you're happy with it, hit OK. You can add as many effects as you like to any part of your project. If you need to go back and edit that effects, just click on that object that has it, and then from here you can go under Properties panel and either trash the effect you currently have or click on the name to edit it. As you're working on your project, it's a really good idea to be saving every so often. To save for the first time, go to File, Save As, and from here you'll have the option to either save to your cloud or save to your computer. Both are recommended, but for now we'll go over how to save to your computer. From here, make sure that your name is correct for your project, and make sure the location is one that you can find later on. The format by default will be an Adobe Illustrator file. Click Save when you're done. You may get a pop-up that looks like this. Just leave all the default options and hit OK. From your Finder or File Explorer, you should be able to locate the folder you saved it to, and it should now appear as whatever you named it, .ai. If you double click on this, it will go ahead and open up an Illustrator for you to continue working. As you're working, you can do a Command S to save or Control S on your keyboard, or you can go to File, Save. If you are all done with your project and you're ready to export so that you can submit to Canvas, go to File, Export, Export As. From here, once again, make sure that your name is correct. The folder is one that makes sense to you. And for format, make sure it is whatever your project is requesting. If it's an Adobe PDF, select that. Otherwise, you also have JPEGs or PNG. If you do choose JPEG or PNG, it's recommended that you check Use Artboards and then select All, or whatever range you want to use. This will ensure that none of the extra bits outside of your project get included, and it's only whatever is within your artboard. I'm going to change mine to the PDF, and then I'm going to hit Export. Usually the default settings for the PDF are fine, but make sure to review your project guidelines. Export PDF when you're done. Now if you locate the folder that you saved to, you should now see a .pdf, and if you click on it, it will open up in a PDF reader as your final project.